Spencer Levy, same question. Why Mexico?
Mexico City, from a tourism perspective, is a city on the rise, and that's really important because, as I've mentioned today on stage, there are 5 indicators of awesome for any city, and they are infrastructure, talent, foreign money, ease of regulatory burden, and live, work, play. And they are not separate. They all work together. So if you see more foreign tourists coming here, they're more likely to invest their money here for commercial and other needs. So Mexico City, city on the rise, but the country overall has a lot of tremendous advantages because of its proximity to the United States for logistics and manufacturing. It's relatively low-cost labor. It's relatively mild climate.
With what kind of cities is competing Mexico City?
Mexico City is what's known as an emerging market. Right, notwithstanding its size, from a commercial real estate perspective, it's still fairly small. As a matter of fact, I looked at these statistics earlier. If Mexico City, or the entire country of Mexico, were compared to one U.S. city, it has about the same trade volume or the same number of commercial real estate transactions as in Atlanta, which is a big city, but it's an entire country and it's one city. And so when I take a look at Mexico City, I do first compare it to some of its peers in Latin America, Sao Paulo, Santiago, Lima, Bogota. Bogota is a city that's really on the rise right now. But if you're Mexico City, you want me to expand that conversation. You want me to say that Mexico City is similar to Chicago, that it is similar to Hamburg, that it is similar to Manchester. Cities that are in major markets, maybe the second biggest city or second or third biggest city in major markets. And once you get there, you're going to see a flood of new capital coming in because foreign capital typically moves together. And they're in about 24 different markets in the world. Mexico City is only being seen by a small number of them today. And certainly, if I were to say the number one thing Mexico City could do is to draw more of that foreign capital in.
Lyman Daniels tried to describe what's going on with the market, the real estate market, and he mentioned a word in Spanish is bipolar.
I would say it is bipolar. One Spanish word today. But I would say that the reality is that if you look at the office market here in Mexico City, you've seen a tremendous amount of new building. In fact, they have 1.5 million square meters that are under construction right now. You've seen tremendous new construction in the prior years, and it's caused some softness in the market, meaning that you've seen rents decline, even though last year had record new absorption. And that absorption came from co-working, business and financial services, and the government. So the good news is you're building more. The good news is you had record new absorption. The bad news is you are seeing some supply overhang, at least in the short term. And part of that supply overhang, I think, is partially due to the recent slowdown in the Mexican economy overall. The numbers just came out today, and GDP in Mexico was 0% growth. In the third quarter, the U.S. was about 1.9%. So the combination of the macro and overbuilding has caused some softness. So that's the bad news. The good news is that we love new product. Tenants love new product. Investors love new product. So notwithstanding the fact you might have some short-term softness, we believe there's going to be long-term strength as the Mexican economy continues to not just improve, but diversify. Because it's a disproportionately manufacturing and logistics economy today. Even though Mexico City has business services, we would expect that business services, the services side of your economy, to blossom over the next several years as the consumer gets stronger. So I would suggest to you, yes, there's a little bit of a short-term bipolar. I get that right?
Okay.
But long-term, Mexico and Mexico City is poised for strength.
And what about other sectors in not only in the country, but related with retail, for example, and the industrial situation, specific the industrial parks that are located in the north of the country?
Well, the industrial sector is, without a doubt, the number one sector from an international investor standpoint in Mexico today, and I expect that to continue, in part for the manufacturing base, autos, aerospace, and other sectors, but also logistics to the United States. Mexico has many competitive advantages to manufacturing in the U.S. or Canada, led by its low cost of labor. The average Mexican worker makes about 10% of what an American worker makes. So that gives them a huge competitive advantage. But I would say this not as a cautionary tale, but something I advise all my countries and cities that I visit to do, is that first, your low cost of labor is great, it's an advantage, but don't rely on that. Mexico has to continue to move up the value chain to do more complex, high, what I call value add manufacturing, and automate more. Or when the US and other high cost places automate more, it will take some of those jobs out of Mexico. The second thing Mexico needs to do from a manufacturing standpoint is diversify. As my colleague and I were talking about today on stage, Mexico has a strong concentration in the automobile sector. I guess the good news is Mexico also has concentrations in aerospace and other industries, but it's huge in autos. I'm concerned about autos. I'm concerned about it globally as the number of registrants for new automobiles has declined, and I think it's going to continue to decline as the preference for owning your own car declines with the increase in Uber and Lyft and other rideshare services, and then eventually self-driving cars, and quite candidly, just the preference for walkability.
What happens if the next year the economy doesn't grow as everybody is expecting?
The reality is that our house forecast today is for slow growth, but slow growth indefinitely. In fact, we don't even have what I call the R word, or recession, currently in our forecast. Now, assuming we do that, the slow and steady growth, we see great opportunities even in a slow growth, or I'll go to your question, a no growth environment. And why is that? Because no growth is a little bit misleading. So you take a country like Japan, a country that my colleague and I have debated at great length recently, and notwithstanding the fact that it's been a slow growth country now for many years, there are some tremendous investment opportunities in Tokyo and in Osaka, and then in submarkets in other places within Japan. The same thing would apply to Mexico. Even if the Mexican economy stays at a flat growth trajectory like it was today, 0% growth today, there's going to be tremendous opportunities in markets in northern Mexico for manufacturing, hotels both here in Mexico City and in the resort areas. I still believe that retail has a tremendous future here in Mexico because the consumer is now getting wealthier, and that's going to really help. And then in the office sector in certain submarkets. And what are those submarkets? The way I define it is as the new city, and that is actually a title of one of my presentations. What is the new city? The new city are areas within your city that have both live, work, play environments, so people don't need cars, and they will attract and or retain talent, which means the people living there, but also the large occupiers going there. So even in a flat growth world, you're going to see opportunities, and which is why I describe myself as a macro pessimist, because I'm very concerned about issues related to demographics, slow growth, but I'm very optimistic for our industry from a micro perspective because I see tremendous opportunities in these corridors, even in a slow growth environment.
What happens if we add to your perspective demographics? Because now we have many millennials, and they have different habits, right? And different philosophy for consumers.
Millennials are just young human beings. And the reason why that's important is because millennials aren't as young as they used to be. The average age of a millennial now is 32 years old, and they are now getting into a different life stage. They're getting married, they're having kids, and so many of the things that we assumed about millennials, always wanting to live in a central business district, never wanting to own a car, never wanting to own a house, a lot of those things are changing, but it's also changing in the workplace. So one of the areas in the workplace that we speak and write a lot about is co-working. And co-working is an area that we just came out with a study regarding how much flex office space we expect to see over the next decade. And we expect it at a minimum to triple in size, even though you've seen certain recent troubles with WeWork. That aside, there are many co-working operators. But I think it's going to be at around a tripling of the space from around 2% today to around 6%, not a 10 times change, in part because I think we have overestimated millennial demand for the space. I think they want flex work, meaning the ability to work from home and at work, though there are going to be some drivers that are going to triple the size of the space, especially the change of the job mix to have more gig type jobs and more people going to that space because of flexibility.
If a businessman asks you to define the Mexican real estate market in 3 words, what do you answer?
Great opportunity today.